I'm James. We got Preston, and of course, David from Bad Dreamers. So, yeah, this has been quite a, the story of how we started working together is pretty exciting.
Yeah, right.
And as I recall, I got an email from Preston as well as Nate Serrata,
Yeah.
like within 24 hours of each other, and completely unrelated, unsolicited, mentioning like, you got to check out the Bad Dreamers. And I think I was with Clayton in LA, and immediately we were just blown away with that first album and knew we had to reach out and try and do something.
Oh, that's right. Because we got on the phone fairly quickly, and you guys were, you were here.
Yeah.
You were out here for like a week or so.
Yep. So, yeah. And then from there to signing that first album, re-releasing it, a couple of remixes, and now we've got 4 tracks from the new album out, and more on the way. But yeah, just to kind of dive in, maybe take us back to kind of the history, the origins of not only the Bad Dreamers, but even like you getting into music and what led you up to the point where the Bad Dreamers began.
Yeah, so I'll try to abbreviate the long version. So I started when I was like 13. I started playing guitar, and I was in the Bad Dreamers was sort of born out of like my passion for filmmaking. But I'll get to that. So I've essentially been making music and film really my entire life, but music kind of took over after I graduated high school, because I found myself wanting to pursue production and songwriting and that whole side of it professionally. So I being in bands and going in and out of studios, paying for studio time and never really being happy with the result of your demos, like it's enough to make you want to be like, I need to learn how to do this myself so that I don't have to pay anyone else to do it. So that led me down a journey of just, ultimately getting my own very small home studio together and making a lot of just unlistenably horrible music for a long time. I still have all of it on like spindles of CDs, and
oh man,
nobody will ever hear it, so don't even try. Can't even bribe me. So as I was producing my own music just on my own, and I'm from Rochester, New York, I started putting out music for myself I think it was on Pure Volume is where I first started releasing music.
Oh, I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Yeah, I started a project. I started a band called Capture Reaction, and I was, it's like it's funny because it was very synth infused rock, so like if you can imagine like if Stabbing Westward was like really going for it in 2004, and they were around, but I think they had that turn into the Christian space, and so that's really what it sounded like, and then my friends Jeff and Nick back in Rochester, we started playing shows, and then that led me into joining another band locally called the Sunstreak, who was a much more serious group. They were already established, and when I joined that band, they were getting ready to go out on Warped Tour in 2006, and they were like, "Yeah, we're doing the entire tour, and we want to sell a record on at our merch table." And so we very quickly made a full-length record. I produced it. They'd written most of the songs, but then that kind of pushed me into the next level of the music business, where we were out there touring with national bands. We had a lot of interest from record companies at the time because we were selling a ton of records out of our merch tent. And then that ultimately got us management, and we did a record deal with like a small label at EMI, and our manager at the time, he's an enormous songwriter and producer. He was an executive at EMI, and he sort of, after the band sort of fizzled out, he and I had a conversation like, hey, what does this mean for you as a writer and a producer? So I did a publishing deal with BMG, then alongside him, I started writing songs and producing records for other artists and stuff, which is kind of how like these things happen here. And what's cool about this plaque in particular, that's actually the Warped Tour compilation disc of 2006. It
Nice.
went gold this year, and we're literally the Sunstreak is the last song on disc 2. Like they were like, fuck it, we'll just sneak it on. But it went gold this year, which is so cool. So like all those guys that I was in the band with, like they can all get gold records for it. And by the way, my drummer in the Bad Dreamers was my drummer in the Sunstreak, Gary Foster.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we go way back. And my bass player, I'm not digressing too much, but what really inspired me to want to play guitar, in 7th grade, we had a junior high talent show, and there was a bunch of 8th graders that had a band, and they played a Green Day song. They played Welcome to Paradise, and the bass player in that band, Ronnie, is my bass player in the Bad Dreamers. He lives out here. He's played bass from like, he's played bass in a bunch of really cool, like sort of pop punk touring bands in the Warped Tour circuit. And yeah, now we're in a band together, and it's just cool. We're just making music together like all these years later, and it's awesome. But so anyway, so the Bad Dreamers was actually born. So I moved to LA in 2013 for two reasons mainly. Number one, because I wanted to start making music for film and TV, and then alongside that, because I wanted to start taking filmmaking more seriously as a writer and director. So in 2017, I made a short film. It was like I'd made a number of short films just back home with friends, but I hadn't made one in LA with a proper crew and everything. So I made my first short in LA, and I wanted there was a scene in the short is online. It's called The Offer. If you look it up, just look up The Offer short horror film. You'll see it. In the opening scene, I wanted a song to be playing on a computer, like in the house that the film takes place in. So I was going around and asking my friends who were artists in bands. I was like, hey, would you let me use a song? I don't have any money, but can I put your song? Because I wanted a real song in the film. And everyone was like, you're making you're what? Because when people see you as a musician, they don't think you do anything else. Like, and I'm also not walking around waving a flag saying, I'm also here to make films. I'm just doing it so that the work can just speak for itself. So after nobody lent me any of their music, I wrote Who You Run To, and I produced it and I put it in the short. And then once the short was out, I wanted people to be able to find that song online. So I created little socials and a SoundCloud and gave it an artist name, and like I just loved making the music. So that's kind of how the project was born, really. Like it was sort of like this convergence of the real beginning of my pursuit as a filmmaker, as well as sort of like giving birth to this project out of necessity for the film. So, and here we are almost 2 albums later with you guys, and it's been fun, man. It's really cool.
Significance to the name, the meaning of the name.
Yeah, I came up with the name with my friend Neil. He and I were tinkering around with the idea of starting a band even before that in 2015. And we had made some music and stuff. And Neil is actually the co-founder of a company called Output, which makes really awesome virtual instruments. They're they're probably one of the biggest virtual contact instrument makers now. But yeah, we came up with the name together, and then we never really did anything with it. So when I wrote Who You Run To, I hit him up. I was like, yo, do you care if I like use that? Like, he was like, yeah, go for it. But it just sounded cool, like I didn't want to just use my name because it's so boring. I think that works for singer-songwriters and like if that's their thing, but I wanted it to have sort of like some sort of implication about, pursuing dreams and, yeah, I don't know. So that's sort of where it came from, but yeah.
Yeah. And so given all of that history and how diverse that is, it probably shouldn't be a surprise that these new songs feel like they're evolving even further from what you did on songs about people, including myself.
Sure.
And so I was wondering, are there specific eras and artists you're looking at for these new tracks and pulling inspiration from, or what's your creative process like for these new tracks?
Yeah, I mean, well, going back to the sort of like shared passion of like film and music, in the first album, a lot of what I was doing is like, a lot of the songs up into maybe some of the more recent ones that I'm finishing were inspired by films that I loved, so like, let's say Somewhere in the City was actually inspired by True Romance.
Oh, yeah.
Or like Georgetown was inspired by The Exorcist. And oftentimes I'll watch a film and I'll imagine maybe like different questions or like sub narratives that these characters might be asking themselves or going through. And like it's fun for me to sort of hypothetically imagine like a whole other world within that idea and turn it into a song or pull from it. So it wasn't really like, it was more of like an experiment in storytelling for me at first, but up until maybe, this year, I had some fairly significant personal things happen like in very short sequence. And it really forced me to start taking a look at my own life and what I'm actually going through and feeling and dealing with, and start writing about those things too. So that's been cool, because even as a songwriter, when you're writing for other artists, if you're writing with that artist, you have to push them to explore the things that they're feeling in order for them to communicate that and to make it like, relatable and honest. But I've never really had to do it or felt inclined to do it for myself, because it just always felt secondary. Like even the Bad Dreamers always kind of felt like, it just felt like this creative outlet that I was able to kind of like unpack and explore and not really tether to emotionally. But as I started this new record and a few things happened, it changed everything. It changed contextually. It changed the way that I was thinking about music, and I just didn't really have a choice but to sort of address some of those things. So yeah, so the later half of the album that we're releasing, the last 5 songs or so, will be incredibly personal, which feels great. I mean, it's good to get it out and just, send it off into the world. But, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and that's something else I wanted to ask. You had kind of mentioned this in some of the internal conversations we've had, but I think your fans would probably find it really interesting too, that your lyrics often feel really specific to places and people.
Yeah.
But as you're saying there, it wasn't always necessarily specific to your life until recently. Is that right?
Yeah, rarely ever, if never. Quite honestly, I mean, a lot of times, because I just, it's when I'm writing a song, I'll always start, just on the piano, and I know that if I can't come up with lyrics and a melody that I can sing on a piano that can live and evoke the same exact emotion with just a voice and an instrument, then to me, it's not even worth pursuing production-wise and building out into a record, because if you don't really have a song, it's like building $1 million house on a horrible foundation. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just gonna sink. There's nothing strong holding it there. So so a lot of times I'll think of like, it'll be a phrase or like, some sort of double meaning, or like some kind of like, I don't know, like an idiom or something that will inspire me to think of those words in a different way. And I find that like the craft of songwriting is best explored. Like a great example, Sasha Sloan just put a song out called House with No Mirrors. And if you listen to that song, she just put it out like 2 days ago. The first lyric is like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, I'd be smarter, I'd feel better. And that from reading the title, from the moment you hear that first lyric, she's working towards getting to the title. And that's like, that's to me what makes a great song, is like telling the story, bringing the listener through that journey of emotions and making it personal, but also, putting a twist on it and making it relatable as well. So
sure. Yeah. I'm glad you explained a little more about your ties to films and being a filmmaker. I'm not sure I knew completely that Bad Dreamers actually grew out of a film project, but you are continuing to make films on your own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a film out to festivals right now called The House Call. And we made it last year, and it's been in the festival circuit since November of last year, and the pandemic kind of changed all of that because a lot of festivals are just not happening, but some of them are transitioning online. Yeah, I mean, as of right now, the plan is to make my first feature next fall, not this fall, but next, in upstate New York, where I'm from. And I'm actually going back in late October of this year to go and shoot a proof of concept for it. But yeah, we've got the script and some of the cast attached. Well, hypothetically, there's a lot of things that sort of float in the air with film projects. It's what's much more complicated to get a film off the ground than it is to start, making a record, because there's so much more involved and it's so much more expensive. But yeah, the goal is to make my first feature next year, and I make genre film. It's horror. It's what I love. It's what I know. So yeah, it's exciting, and ultimately, like I look at somebody like John Carpenter, or even like I suppose Dario Argento, or like I don't know, like Carpenter. A lot of people don't realize, like he wrote and directed Halloween, but he also wrote the music. He scored that, and there was the same for a number of his films moving on. And I feel like, to me, that's the ultimate goal creatively, is to tell a story both visually and musically. If I can, find a way to do that in a feature length format, that's ultimately how I want to spend my time. So slowly working towards it, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. It's ambitious, for sure.
Yeah.
And so you live out in LA, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to share about your experience living out there in LA?
Well, it's too expensive. There's too many people. Yeah, I mean, I love it. I mean, I feel like it's probably, if you're any type of creative mind, it's the greatest city in the world, because, whether your pursuit is, it could be fashion or being a chef and opening a restaurant, or being a filmmaker or a musician or a comedian or an author, or and now influencers, or whatever. Like, I feel like it's the global hub for all of those worlds, and they all sort of converge in this area. And there's something really special about that. And I feel like, a lot of times you'll hear like, oh, everyone in LA is so fake and everything, but I firmly believe that the people that are saying that are just, they're around the wrong people, and they're spending their time poorly, because everyone comes here for a reason. And although that, some of it's industrialized and, it's kind of home based for a lot of those industries, I think that it's magnetic for just all kinds of creative minds. And you can make so many great connections and so many great relationships. And, like film, for me, the reason I'm so passionate about film is because it's like the master recipe of all of the arts. It's music, it's writing, it's theater, it's carpentry, production, it's photography, it's I mean, it's so many different crafts that come together to make this one experience. And yeah, and I find that, like, even when you walk over where the Hollywood sign is, every day, all day, if the sun is out, it's packed up there. And there's something really interesting about a location that just draws people from all over the world to just see and experience this one thing that represents an idea or like a dream or something. And yeah, I do love it here. I mean, it for sure has its shortcomings, and it is just way too much fucking money to live here. But yeah, I do love it. I miss home. I miss Rochester, but yeah, I'll probably stay here forever.
Cool.
For sure.
It is pretty amazing. I've only been out there a couple of times, but like you're saying, everyone is involved, it feels like, in some sort of creative or ambitious project.
Yeah.
And being able to just bounce around from place to place and make these connections with people and see the different things they're working on. It's a unique environment. Yeah,
totally.
So we did want to touch base on this new album a little bit, but was there anything else, David, that you wanted to touch on first, or James, if you had any other questions?
No, I was going to bring up, but you said it a few minutes ago. You mentioned horror, and I wonder if you could expand on that. Just that some of the conversations we've had, I've started to understand. Georgetown was an Exorcist, related thing, but just how much of an impact that genre is, or maybe any other insights, favorite movies, directors. You mentioned a few names already, but
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Horror, and I've learned since kind of exploring like the psychology of why I'm so drawn to genre film and horror film. I was introduced to horror at a young age just by watching TV. I remember like one of the earliest things I saw on TV was like there used to be a Nightmare on Elm Street TV show. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Freddy Krueger had his own show. And it was like, I want to say it was like Saturday nights or what night of the week it was, but it was on late, and it would kind of be like it wasn't like a mini series, but it was like an episodic thing where he would open the show, he would introduce it, and then there would be this sort of, anthological like series of television of all kinds of different stories where he would weave in and out. Sometimes he wouldn't really play a relevant part. And, when you're a little kid and you see those things, it definitely like it scares you and it freaks you out, but it makes you curious. But my parents split up when I was 12, turning 13. And for whatever reason, I just clung on to like scary movies. That summer, I remember it was the first time I'd really watched The Exorcist. A friend of mine growing up was super into Halloween. Like, I mean, I had seen all 6 at that point Halloween films by the time I was 11, I think. And it just stuck with me, and it turns into like this. I mean, I think the psychological explanation is like when you feel out of control as a child, and then you can kind of like dive into this world where, if you're dealing with scary things in your own life, watching horror films gives you some sort of control over that fright that you cope with internally in your regular life, because you can pause it, you can turn it off, you can walk away from it, then you can go and it might inspire you to make your own films and stuff. So like, even if you go to my Vimeo page, it's not hard to find. I think it's just like David Schuler Official. You'll see like some of the stupid little horror shorts that I made as a kid. I put them up just cause they're just fun.
I'm totally gonna go look that up.
Yeah. No, there's one from like when I was in 10th grade. I mean, it's so bad, it's awful. But it's so much fun. But yeah, it's just something that I feel like musically and just aesthetically, it gives you so much agency to explore like heightened realities and really kind of like build worlds, whether it be like, something like Halloween, which is a very ordinary, there's nothing crazy going on. It's just a story about a little town with people, and but the mood that they build in that film is so, Carpenter just nailed this thing. And like The Exorcist is the same. It's a hyper realistic world that you're brought into with surreal circumstances, and between music and the cinematography and the pacing of the storytelling, it's something that I've always been drawn to. And I love it. I mean, I'm obsessed with the genre. I have so many just horror books just lying around. I've got like, all stupid Michael Myers statues, and I have like the Scream Jiffy Pop on my stove. I'm never gonna pop it, but it's got the Scream logo on the top of it. And I'm like, I don't know, I just love it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great. It really came through in Georgetown. I think that song, it really came through in a way that maybe wasn't evident on your earlier songs, but that horror theme mixed with this kind of pop music. It was, really pretty remarkable blend of ideas happening there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, The Exorcist was a big one. And I would say, oh my God, what's so funny thinking now, one of the first things that ever really, really scared the shit out of me, you're gonna laugh so hard. You guys know Days of Our Lives, that soap opera?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so when I don't even know what summer it was, but or it might not have been summer, but when I was really young, they actually had a storyline in the show that was about a woman that was possessed by the devil, and they went for it. Her name was Marlena, and you know, when you're just at home at 1 o'clock during the day and it's bright and sunny out, you don't expect to turn on NBC and hear this woman with this demonic voice and these scary eyes talking into the camera. But like, you know, it really stuck with me and it scared me for real. And like, I've gone back and watched almost that entire season of that soap opera just out of like pure fascination for like how weird it was that they chose to do that on a soap opera and how serious they took it and the execution. I mean, it was fucking wild. But yeah, I will never forget watching that show and just being terrified. And my dad being like, "Why are you watching soap operas? You don't get it. It's so scary."
Yeah, those shows are weird. My grandma was into it when I was a little kid, and I remember like people were being buried alive, and you know, like,
yeah, no, soaps are great, man. God bless them.
So, will there be any horror themed tracks on this new album?
I mean, you know, Georgetown is definitely like a cut on the record. Once we drop the actual full LP, but I don't necessarily feel like. I think that I've kind of. I think I've emptied that tap for now. I think.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I am so invested in making this first feature. So like, you know, like my two sort of main creative endeavors right now are finishing this record, and then immediately after that moving into getting this film funded and off the ground. So yeah, I mean, you know, I'd be lying if I said that like 70s and 80s horror cinema, just sonically and in general, it just inspires a lot of the things that I do. So there's always probably going to be some sort of way to take it back to that place, no matter what the music is or what it's saying, just because it had such an effect on me for so long at a young age. But yeah, for now, I think I've explored that sort of creative dance, I guess, I suppose. And
Sure.
Yeah.
So the album is called Space and Time.
Yeah.
Your new track, Romantic Comedy, is out. Just came out this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have a new track already lined up next month. Unspoken, Unbroken.
Yep.
And you're aiming for one song a month.
Yeah, through February.
Yeah.
Yep.
So even at the label here, we've really just gotten a taste of these new ideas you're working with.
Yeah.
What can fans expect from these new songs and from the full album?
I think, you know, like I said, I'm sort of just now exploring. Well, I've done some of the writing for the actual songs that are written. But yeah, the difference for the music moving ahead through the remainder of the record is that it's all very personal in terms of the subject matter. And you know, it's dark and it's heavy because like I said, like there was a period over the last year, 6 months to 9 months, where I just felt like I was just constantly just getting tested in some, I don't know, some sort of emotional or like just big life changes happening, loss, and yeah, so I didn't really have a choice but to explore those things, and it really informed the way that the music is going to sound and the way it's going to feel, and hopefully the way that it makes everyone else feel. And you know, Space and Time was, again, it's kind of like an exploration of that double meaning, because you know, space and time, like it's something that like the world sort of or our existence is built upon, like, you know, like just the idea of time itself being immeasurable and infinite, and and like space being infinite, and like just all these sort of elements that comprise those things and make it so unknown. But also, like taking space for yourself in your life, and taking time for yourself in your life when you go through certain things, to really let them sink in and try to understand them, and let those feelings move through you, so that you can hopefully take those experiences and turn them into something. So that's kind of what this has become. So I chose to call it Space and Time, because that's kind of like it's been like a new sort of experiment for me, is really trying to take these circumstances and experiences that I've dealt with while I started making this record, and how it changed everything about it, and and how it's evolved into this thing that ultimately it'll become. But yeah, that's kind of where the title comes from. And yeah, but I'm really excited. It feels like a good realization of like what it is that I've been through and that I want to leave people with. So
yeah, it's a great insight into it. And we're enjoying, at the label, we're enjoying everything you're turning in so far. We're excited to getting these tracks out, and the fan response has been great so far. So I know they're looking forward to the new tunes also.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's been really a pleasure seeing you go through what you've gone through and how you're distilling that down to these songs. And yeah, one of the upcoming songs, everybody's going to need to have a box of Kleenex or
right. Yeah. And I think we can talk about that quick. So I think that'll be the last song we release. Yeah. And I'd like to release it on February 7th. It's a song that I wrote about my dad dying. And that'll be 1 year to the day when he passed away. So I feel like that would be like a nice sort of tribute to him, and kind of a way for me to maybe bookend some of that grief, I suppose. Or I don't know, I can't say that I've ever really gone into that part of my mind when it came to exploring or writing music. Man, for 3 months I was certain that there was no shot I was gonna be able to finish that track, because I could, like, it was written, but I couldn't even sing it. Couldn't. I'd open my mouth and that'd be it. Just come apart. So I'm very, very happy that it's done, and it feels like the right way to sort of close the book. And I think, we've talked about this, we've touched on it, but I think we'll do like a vinyl physical, with a merch bundle, and it'll just be a really cool way to sort of, I suppose, put a bow on the cycle of music, and then send it off into the world on that note. Because yeah, it'll be very personal for me, and representative of the process of making the record. And it's weird because like when that happened, he passed away in February. 2 weeks after that, my dog died in a freak accident. The dog that I moved to LA with 7 years ago, exactly 2 weeks after my dad died. And then right after that, in March, this pandemic started. So, you have to just be home and thinking about what you're going through, and you can't really get out and go and socialize and try to distract yourself. You have to like look that thing in the eye and confront it at like an accelerated rate when you can't even go see friends or whatever. So but I'm actually thankful that I had to go through it that way, because had I not, I don't know how long it would have taken to sort of get through that initial grieving process and really confront those feelings, and really go into them and let them sort of do their thing, and come out of it like somehow inspired and able to turn it into music, and to be able to focus. And yeah, it's just so weird to think that was 6 months ago, and I'm actually able to like wake up and shower and like go and like have a day and work and not come apart, and like because
Yeah.
when you're in the middle of those things, there is no end to that. You know, it's like just this black curtain that's just pulled over your existence, and you have no idea where that ends. So yeah, it feels really good to be able to sort of take it and turn it into something else now. So yeah.
Well, thank you for, sharing that, being vulnerable, sharing, the story writing, the song, the music, sharing your voice with us and with the world.
Cool. No, I appreciate it. I'm glad you guys were able to put this together and, to help get the music out there and find ears. And yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed this process working with you guys and Clayton and the whole camp. I mean, I think you guys are all great people. And that's really what it boils down to for me, is like, it's less about like in 50 years from now, I'm not going to be thinking about like how many monthly fucking listeners I have on. So I don't give a shit how many. It's like, what was the experience like during that time? Did I enjoy spending my time with the people that I worked with? What was I like as a person? Who was I around? Who was I communicating with? That's the shit that matters, like being able to create and put out art and projects and all that stuff. That's what that keeps me fueled, and it's what I love to do. But ultimately, if you're not doing that with the right people, and if you're not affecting the people around you in the right way, in a healthy way, and and you don't have like love in your life and friendships and stuff, then like you haven't lived the life that you could live, that you could have the potential of living. So yeah, for me, it's been great working with people that are just excited and inspired and open to ideas and stuff. Yeah, so I'm excited. I think our best stuff is ahead of us for sure.
Great. Yeah, same here. Definitely feel the same way.
Yeah, and thanks for jumping on, taking some time to chat. If there's any final thoughts from either of you, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, new music every month. Looking
every
forward.
month. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Treasure.
No, you're ahead on schedule. So
yeah, no, totally. Thankfully.
Yeah. Yep.
Thankfully.
Cool. Well, thanks, David. Really appreciate you jumping on, and we're excited to get this the new music out.
Awesome. Sounds good, guys.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. See ya.
See you guys.
See ya.